They laughed before she ever reached the church, and the laughter followed her like dust, trailing a wagon wheel across the dry Texas road, curling into the air and settling on her skin. Her dress, her silence, because silence was all she had ever known and all they thought she was worth. The small wooden church sat at the edge of the ranch town, like a witness that had seen too much and spoken too little. Its bell unmoving, its doors open, its shadow stretching across the dirt road where the townsfolk gathered, whispering and smirking and nudging one another as the bride arrived, not standing tall on a proud groom's arm, but stepping down alone from the back of a modest wagon, her white dress simple and slightly worn, her veil trembling in the late afternoon breeze. Clara Whitmore could not hear the laughter, not the sharp crack of it or the cruel tones layered inside it, but she saw it clearly enough in the curled lips, the shaking shoulders, the way eyes slid toward her, and then away as though she were something embarrassing, something pitiful, something wrong. She kept her gaze lowered, hands folded tightly in front of her, fingers curled around a small bouquet of pale, pink flowers she had picked herself at dawn, flowers she had pressed to her chest while she knelt in prayer, asking God for courage, for strength, for the grace to endure one more day of being seen as less than whole. Clara had been deaf since the age of 4, struck by scarlet fever that stole sound from her world and left behind a silence so complete it frightened her parents at first, frightened the town later, and finally hardened into a judgment everyone seemed comfortable making, that she was slow, broken, unfit for marriage, certainly unworthy of a man like Jacob Hale. Jacob Hale, the rancher everyone feared and respected in equal measure, stood a short distance away now, tall and broad-shouldered, hat pulled low, jaw clenched so tight a vein stood out along his neck. He could hear the laughter, every word, every cruel joke tossed carelessly into the air like a stone aimed at a bird. He had grown up with these people, worked beside them, bled with them, buried kin with them, and yet in that moment he felt farther from them than he ever had riding alone across the plains at night. They had mocked him too when he announced he would marry Clara Whitmore, the deaf girl who lived on the edge of town with her widowed mother, the girl who spoke with her hands and eyes, who read lips better than most men read contracts, who worked harder than anyone he knew and complained less than anyone he had ever met. "She can't even hear you say your vows," someone had laughed. "What kind of wife can't hear her husband?" Another had added. Jacob had said nothing then. He rarely did. Words were tools to him, meant to be used carefully, not wasted. But today, watching Clara walk alone through the crowd, her shoulders drawn inward, her face pale but determined, something hot and dangerous stirred in his chest. He remembered the first time he saw her, standing knee-deep in a river washing clothes, sleeves rolled up, hair pinned back, sunlight catching in the droplets on her skin. She had looked up and smiled at him then, a simple, unguarded smile that had undone him more completely than any woman's flirtation ever had. She hadn't known who he was, hadn't cared about his land or his reputation or the rumors that followed him like shadows. She had only seen a man, and she had smiled. That smile had stayed with him through long days and longer nights, through storms and cattle drives and hard decisions that weighed on him like stones. When he learned she was deaf, truly deaf, not just hard of hearing, something inside him had softened rather than recoiled, because he saw then the strength it must take to live in a world that constantly forgot to slow down for you, to explain itself to you, to include you. He learned her language quietly, patiently, practicing signs alone at night by lamplight, feeling foolish at first and then fiercely proud. When her eyes lit up the first time he signed her name back to her, she had cried then, tears slipping down her cheeks as she laughed silently. And in that moment Jacob Hale knew with a certainty that frightened him that he would spend the rest of his life protecting that light in her eyes. The town never understood. They saw only what she lacked, never what she possessed. They whispered that she would be a burden, that she would shame him, that she would never be able to run a household or raise children properly, that she would embarrass him in public, that she would slow him down. Jacob let them talk. He had built his ranch by letting fools underestimate him. But today was different. Today was supposed to be sacred. Clara stopped a few steps short of the church door, uncertainty flickering across her face as she sensed the tension in the air. She could feel eyes on her, feel the vibration of movement, the shift in the crowd. And though she could not hear the laughter, she knew it was there. She always knew. Her mother stood near the door, hands clasped tightly, eyes shining with both pride and worry. Clara lifted her gaze and saw Jacob then, really saw him, standing alone, facing the crowd rather than standing with them. His body angled toward her as if the rest of the world did not exist. Relief flooded her face, and she took the last steps toward him. But before she could reach his side, one of the men near the back snorted loudly, clapping another on the shoulder, exaggerating his mouth so she could read the words. Poor Jacob. Marrying a girl who can't even hear herself being mocked. Clara froze. The words struck like a slap, sharp and humiliating. Her hands trembled around the bouquet. For a heartbeat she considered turning back, retreating to the wagon, to the small house where silence at least was honest. But then she felt it, the ground shifting slightly beneath her feet as Jacob moved. He stepped forward, boots heavy against the dirt, until he stood directly in front of her, blocking her view of the crowd entirely. He lifted his hands, signing slowly, deliberately, his eyes locked on hers. "Look at me," he signed. Clara's breath caught. She nodded. "You are not alone," he continued. "You never will be." Her eyes filled with tears, and she nodded again. Then Jacob turned. He turned to face the crowd, and the laughter faltered, confusion rippling through them as they realized something was about to happen, something they could not dismiss with a joke. Jacob took off his hat and held it at his side. His voice, when he spoke, was calm, but carried across the yard with the authority of a man used to being obeyed. "You laugh because you think silence means weakness," he said. "You laugh because you think not hearing. Your cruelty makes her smaller than you." Murmurs rose, defensive, uneasy. Jacob took a step closer to them. "But this woman you mock works harder than any of you. She shows more patience in one day than most of you manage in a lifetime. She knows kindness without needing praise, strength without needing noise, faith without needing to hear a single sermon." Someone scoffed, but Jacob did not stop. "She reads people better than you ever will because she has learned to watch, to notice, to understand without words. She has survived loss, loneliness, and ridicule without letting it rot her heart." He glanced back at Clara briefly, softening, then faced them again. "So you can laugh if you want. But understand this, she is better than all of you." The words fell like a hammer. Silence followed, heavy and absolute. Clara did not hear his speech, not a single word of it. But she saw the change ripple through the crowd, saw mouths close, saw eyes drop, saw shame creep into faces that had worn arrogance so comfortably moments before. She looked at Jacob, confusion etched across her features, and he turned back to her, signing again. "I told them the truth," he said, "and the truth does not need sound to be heard." Tears spilled freely now, sliding down her cheeks as she smiled at him. A smile so radiant it seemed to wash the dust and cruelty from the day. The preacher cleared his throat awkwardly, gesturing them inside. But the moment had already etched itself into the hearts of everyone present, whether they liked it or not. As they walked toward the church door together, Jacob guiding Clara gently with a hand at her back. Some of the townsfolk looked away. Others watched with something like awe, and a few felt something shift uncomfortably inside them. A seed of doubt about the judgments they had clung to for so long. Clara crossed the threshold of the church, not as an object of pity, but as a bride, claimed fiercely and publicly by a man, unashamed of her silence. And though she could not hear the church bell when it finally rang, she felt the vibration of it through the floorboards, through Jacob's arm, through her own chest, a reminder that even in silence, something powerful was beginning. If this story has moved you even a little, if you believe voices like Clara's deserve to be seen and defended, remember to subscribe, because stories like this only continue when people choose to listen with their hearts.